Hey folks, welcome back to SWBCrawler. I'm Nate, and today we're going to be working on replacing the fuel injectors in my 05 Jeep Wrangler Unlimited. So I picked up these 4-hole injectors. You can't see the holes, I'm sure, but I assure you there's 4 in there. These 4-hole injectors from K Suspension, they're remanufactured fuel injectors. The factory injectors have a single hole in them, and mine have been in there, as far as I know, from factory. I've got 130-something thousand miles on this Jeep, and I've been having engine codes P0171 and P0174, which are both fuel system too lean errors. Now, I made another video about replacing the idle air controller and, what was the other one? The map controller? Map sensor? And I thought that solved the problem, but it didn't. So, here we are again. The garage is a little crowded today. As you can see, boxes everywhere. I've got a couple projects in the works. Not projects, maintenance things, really. But I do have a metal cloak lift kit that's going to be going on the wife's Jeep Wrangler Unlimited. She's got a 2014 JKU, and I'll be making a video on that once I'm ready to do it. However, next weekend, I'm going to Bantam, and I wanted to get these fuel injectors fixed and do some oil changes in both the tow rig and the LJ before we go. But that's not this video. But that's why the whole shop's so crowded. Bear with me. So I almost forgot something very important. I already started taking the intake off and realized you need to depressurize the fuel system. And the way to do that, if you start the engine up and then pull this relay, if you can see well enough, this is the fuel relay, the fuel pump relay. It's number 37 in the underhood fuse box, right? So basically what we're going to do, we're going to start the Jeep up. We're going to pull this fuse, and what should happen is the engine should sputter out from lack of fuel because the fuel pump will be off. Wish me luck. So first things first, we need to get some things out of the way. The injectors, of course, are right here. I don't know how well you can see all that. There's a couple things in the way. The air intake has to come off and get out of the way, which means this has to come off. The sensor here has to be out of the way, right? So that's going to have to come off of there. I'm going to disconnect that. This is my custom intake that I did in another video. So yours will look different than this. This will go straight across over to the airbox. But the injectors, you see these cables here, are connected to the stock fuel injectors. You may not have this heat shielding either. That's an extra kit that I put on. But at any rate, this is the fuel rail, if you can see that. Okay, this is what delivers fuel to the injectors. And then the injectors, of course, shoot fuel into the cylinders. I recommend that you clean off as much of this as possible while you're working. Mine's relatively clean because I was recently in here to do all this heat shielding. But if yours is cruddy, you're going to want to clean that crap out of there before you take those injectors out, because otherwise that crap's going to get into your cylinders, and that's probably a recipe for a bad day. So I'm going to start working on getting this stuff apart, and we'll pick up where we're at a point where, well, where I think you might need to see what's going on. Okay, so I've got you zoomed in now. You should see what I'm doing. This guy is the cable for the cruise control. It slides on like this, right? If you open up the throttle a bit by pushing this with your thumb, then it'll just shoop right off that way. This, on the other hand, which is the actual throttle cable, pops off this way. Now, the next thing to think about is the bracket that those cables are in is in your way. I also started labeling these wires for the fuel injectors, but I can't get to all of them. So I'm going to get this out of the way, and then we should be able to get to them. So this guy here, and then there's one right next to injector number 2. Don't lose these. That would be, you know, not fun. I think it's just those 2, and then that whole bracket should get out of the way. Yep. Slightly better access. Okay, so here's the wire for number 3. That's what I couldn't get to. Okay, there's number 3. Now, the next thing we can do is unplug them. To unplug them, you basically pull up on these red tabs, and then they should unplug. If they're like most tabs on this Jeep, they need some persuasion. There, okay, just need a little persuasion. Okay, so pull up the red tab, and then I think there's a button. Yep, and then this should unplug. One. So there's the tab, red tab, button. Those are unplugged. Now, the next thing we need to do is there's bolts here that hold the fuel rail in. Oh, there's also this. This is the fuel line. You probably can't see what I'm pointing to because it's blocked by my AC, I think, lines here. But I think that's AC. There's a little clip on here that has to come off. Metal clip. Okay, and that is supposed to retain the thing. And then you need one of these guys. This is a release clip for a 3/8 line. I happen to have this kit, this set. A friend of mine bought this because he was working on his car here and he didn't need them after that, so he left them for me. But this is different sized release tools. But this fits. Supposed to fit around the line here, and it fits up underneath the collar. You can't see any of this. Let me move the camera. All right, so now you can see what I'm talking about here. This fits over the line. These lines are still in my way, I know, but that slides up underneath there and pushes in. This is that clip I was talking about. The clip kind of goes on here like this, up underneath there and then in there. That like a safety. Now, fuel could still come out of here even though we've released the pressure and we drained it all out. So I'm gonna take an old t-shirt, just kind of put it underneath here so that if any fuel comes out, it has a place to go other than pooling on top of my air intake. Because the air intake is right above the exhaust. The exhaust gets very hot, and we know what happens when there's hot and gas. Bad stuff. Okay, so this should press right up in here and release. See if it works. That, and then this is supposed to, just like that. Just like that. Like I planned it, guys. I totally planned that. Okay, now that's, I do smell gas. There's a little bit dripping out. We're cool. All is well. I'm just going to leave that there for now. We should, I don't want to risk like damaging this line. It's a hard line. It's not actually a hard line. It's just routed really weird. Yes, it is a hard line. So I don't want to mess with that too much. It's disconnected, so I should be able to take these out. Because the next step is these bolts here come out that hold the fuel rail. And then the whole fuel rail should kind of lift out of here. Should. Now this here and this over here, that's right, that's going to be in the way. Bollocks. Another case of everything's in your way. That may improve matters. I can't tell, maybe. We shall see in a moment. Okay, there's one here. One here. These will need deep sockets. and then one here and one here. I think they're 10 millimeter. Let's find out. Yep, 10 mil. Let's take off that extension because it's kind of in the way. There's one. This is not going to work because I can't get to it. Need a wobbler. That's loose. Okay, let me find a deep. Obviously, if I would use like a normal ratchet, this would be easier. But what's the point of that? I've got this thing. I should use it, right? Know how that works? This guy way back here, also 10 mil deep. There we go. Wobbly, wobbly, wobbly. Okay, so these should all come out of here now. Just kind of remember what went where. There are washers on those. I don't know. Are they captive? They are captive, so they won't fall off and get lost on you. So remember the two short guys in the middle, the deep ones on the ends. Okay, that's why you need a deep. You see how that's got that stud on there. All right. I recommend doing this in a well-ventilated garage, guys, because it's starting to smell like gas, and that's not really good for you, right? That's what they tell me anyway. All right, now what they say is you should be able to just pull this kind of upward gently, and it should pop out.
Getting the fuel injectors to unseat was not as easy as other YouTube videos that I watched seemed to suggest that it would be. I don't know if it was the amount of miles on my Jeep or some other factor, but basically I worked from the rear to the front, so from cylinder 6 up to cylinder 1, working them out one at a time. The rear, like 4 cylinders, seemed to pop out relatively easy. Cylinder number 2 was a little harder, and cylinder number 1 just didn't want to let go. It took me quite a bit of work. The gist of it is basically wiggle it around, up and down, left and right. If you can manage to get the clearance, twist it around a little bit, and it will come free. Just be persistent. Don't be too rough on it, because last thing you want to do is crack the fuel rail or something like that. It does come out. Be persistent. Be careful. You got this.
All right, so basically it was just really stuck. I had to wiggle it around a bunch. Filling gas, exactly what I didn't want to do all over the intake. So this is full of gas, because it's the fuel rail, it's supposed to be. Basically there's clips on each of these that need to come off, and then the old injectors come off, and then we can put the new injectors on. So these are the old injectors. You can see some of them are nice and shiny. Some of them are really cruddy. Most of them are pretty shiny, so like that one looks nasty. I did run some fuel injector cleaner through this not long ago, so they should be relatively clean, but you know, here's what it is. Okay, so this is those clips I was talking about. These things here, and they're supposed to pop off. You can't really see them that well, but I'll show you with when I get one off. Okay, so these are supposed to pop right out of here, like this. That's one of the clips. Now this is supposed to come right out of here. Or so they say. There we go. Old injector. I don't know if you can see that single hole there because you're way back there, but the new injectors look pretty similar. They have 4 holes instead of 1. So this goes in here. Okay. And then that, okay, that lines up right here with the clip. There, okay. So these reliefs here, you can see that. I don't want to zoom in. I don't want to touch the camera. My hands are grimy. There's little reliefs here. That's where the clip fits in. This is the injector side.
All right, so installing the new injectors, the O-rings on the injectors should be lubricated. Now, if you look on the internet, you will find people arguing as to whether they should or should not be lubricated. I'm telling you, they probably should. But I don't know. Do some research if you really aren't sure. What I found was they should be lubricated either with silicone grease or, you know, like I've even found people saying that the stuff you use on your sliders for your brake calipers is good enough. But a lot more folks simply say soak them in a little bit of gas, because gas is petroleum-based and it is technically a lubricant. Or just plain old motor oil, 10W30 motor oil. The O-rings on the K suspension injectors already had some oil on them, so I opted not to lubricate them further. I don't know if that was the right choice or not, but I mean, I got them installed. They seemed to go in okay. They weren't flat out dry. The one piece of advice that I got from most people is do not install them dry, because that could lead to leaks. Fuel leaks in this position can lead to vehicle fires. So you want to be careful here. Make sure these O-rings are seated well and check it really well for leaks after you get things reinstalled.
Okay, now we got to put it back in the Jeep. And the idea is this should just kind of thump right back in and put it all back together. Theoretically. All right, let's see if this goes back in like it's supposed to. It should. I mean, why wouldn't it, right? It should just pop right the hell back in. Just like it popped right out like it was supposed to, right? Because everything on a Jeep works exactly as planned, right? Right. Let's line all these up good. And we'll just kind of push. Hope for the best. Surprise. So theoretically, it's impossible to make them too loose, because once you tighten these bolts back in, it should force them back into the proper depth. But I'm thinking you don't want to do that until they're seated. Getting them seated could be a challenge in itself. See, this is the stuff I like to show you guys, because not everything works like it's supposed to on the first try. Okay, it's about bottomed out. I think that is that.
So obviously the bolts need to go back into the fuel rail. Pretty straightforward. The short ones go in the two center holes. The two that needed the extension go on the two outer holes. Make sure they're good and snug. I didn't look up a torque spec. These bottom out on the machine surface in the air intake manifold. So you really just tighten them until they're good and snug. And then you can reconnect all of the wires for the injectors.
We pay attention to what they're labeled, and we plug them back in. Again, right, this is pretty straightforward. It's not like they moved around a lot, but it cannot hurt to be safe. That says number 6 on it. This should say number 5 on it. You can read my handwriting, that looks kind of like a 5. I have terrible handwriting, guys. Terrible. Okay, now the little collar is in the way, which is about what I expected. Just make sure these click, obviously, because you're putting them on there. It's the sensor, where's the It's stuck. Of course it's stuck. Why the hell wouldn't it be stuck? Okay, this says 4. And I don't know that it's going to hurt anything to leave this tape on here, but I'm going to take it off when I'm done. Just because I don't want combustible things in my engine bay that aren't supposed to be here. Okay, this should say 2, no, 3. 3. Make sure they click. That should say 2. See, now this is a good example, right? They're really close to each other. That's 1. That's 2. See, if I hadn't labeled them, there'd be some ambiguity there. I wouldn't know which was which. Okay, and then 1. Click, pop. They're all popped. They all seem solid. Okay, now we just got to put everything back together again.
All right, so I will spare you guys the reassembly step-by-step here. You saw how it came apart. It goes back together in the opposite direction. Simple as that. Put the bracket back on for the throttle cable and the cruise control there. Put the air intake back together. Make sure all the nuts, bolts, and whatevers are good and tight. And you're done.
To reprime the system, you're supposed to turn the key on 3 times in a row, but not start it. But first, let's put our fuel relay back in. You guys let me know if any gas like comes spewing out of anything. Okay. One, 2, 3. Okay, that should have pressure to the system now. Nothing appears to be leaking. Nothing I can see anyway. That guy's good. I smell some gas, but I think that's from what I spilled earlier. Nothing seems loose or anything. All right, we're going to start it up and see what happens. Let it run for just a couple minutes, and then we're going to shut it off, check for leaks. All right, so I am back from a test drive, and the Jeep did not blow up or catch fire, which is a good thing. I've checked it over and over and over again. I do not see any leaks. Everything seems great. So, I don't have really any way to measure whether. Ooh, that's hot. That's a radiator, duh, of course it's hot. All right, I don't really have any way to measure if I've gained any performance or whatever. I can say that when I gunned it, it felt more responsive, but you know how that goes. It felt better is kind of subjective. So anyway, like I said, got these injectors from K Suspension. From what I understand, you can buy Ford or Dodge injectors, but I don't know what models or whatever. The link to K Suspension was so simple. They were like $120 for all 6 for the 0540. They have packages for the 4-cylinder, the 2.5 and the 2.4. They have packages for the older 4.0s. It's just dirt simple. You go there, you tell it what engine you've got, and they send you remanufactured injectors. Now, like I said, remanufactured. They seem to be in pretty darn good shape. They're supposed to be all cleaned up, and whatever they do to remanufacture injectors, they work. Came with new O-rings and whatnot on them. And honestly, there was a little bit of a struggle there getting the fuel rail off, but once it was off, really, this whole job was pretty darn simple. I will put links in the description of this video to K-Suspension, where I got the injectors, to the heat soak prevention heat shielding kit that I have on here, and the video where I built that air intake. If any of you are curious about any of those three things, there will be links in the description. This video is not sponsored by K-Suspension or DEI, which I think is where I got the heat shielding kit from. They're just things that I've shown you in this video that if you're curious about, they're down there. If you want to support the channel, you should head to SWBCrawler.com. There's a nice little store there where you can either buy things that have been featured in my videos, some of which I get affiliate payments out of. There's also a bunch of merchandise and whatever that I design and put out on SWBCrawler.com, so you should check those out. And to be honest, you can just find more of my content if you want to see what I do and what I'm all about. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video if you like it, hit the notification button if you want to be notified when I put up a new video, and I think that checks all the YouTuber begging checkboxes. Remember folks, get out there and wheel. I'll catch you in the next one.